2 weeks into renovating our place, and not everything survived the plan. And that's the same failure I watch in a lot of AI projects over and over. Whether it's AI project actually, or an ERP implementation, in truth, when I see one of these die, it's almost never because the initial plan was bad. Rather, it dies because nobody adjusted this initial plan once reality disagreed with it. And I'm watching that same pattern play out right now in my own bathroom. We had drawings, measurements, but 2 weeks in, it didn't really survive intact. Once the wall opened, once the tiles came down, we did the layout properly instead of forcing the old plan to fit by a few millimeters. On paper, a few millimeters is nothing. In a bathroom, we fixed plumbing in the shower and all these other things. A few millimeters is the difference between a plan that works and a plan you are now explaining away. Then there's the surprise. Something the previous owner did that nobody flagged because nobody looked for what they are not scoped to look for. A wall that isn't structural on the drawing, but is structural in reality. A pipe rooted somewhere, nobody documented, because whoever rooted it had no reason to think anyone would ever need that documentation. You find this mid-demolition. Not during planning, because planning only ever inspects what's visible from the surface. We're doing a lot of this ourselves. And that means, of course, the replanning has to go around evenings and weekends. It also means accepting a version of the old military line, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Close enough for our purpose, the plan dies on contact. What you do next is the actual work, even though tearing down the wall, is work as well. But this isn't just a renovation problem. It's what happens the moment any implementation moves from scoping document to actual system. You scope against the documented process, the stuff that's measurable, the stuff someone wrote down at some point and nobody revisited since. Then implementation starts and the real workflow doesn't match the documentation. Take, for example, an undeclared spreadsheet that's actually running a chunk of the process, or a manual override that 3 people have quietly relied on for years that they never told anyone because it worked and nobody asked. A tool doing something adjacent to what the new system is supposed to replace, close enough that nobody thought to mention it separately. None of that gets flagged in scoping, because discovery checks documentation, not real behavior. And even when you do check real behavior, some of this stays hidden until late, because people don't volunteer the workaround they built themselves. They just use it. That's why you only find it once you actually start building, the same way you only find the undocumented pipe once the wall's already open. Once you find it, patching around the original plan is usually worse than fixing that piece properly. You can build a workaround for the workaround. It'll technically function. It'll also mean the next person who touches this system inherits 2 layers of undocumented behavior instead of only 1. A half-fixed workflow isn't a fixed workflow. It's just a more expensive version of the same problem postponed. There's a name for this: the project management triangle. Time, cost, scope. Here's what people get wrong about it in practice. They treat all 3 of them as equally likely to move, but they are not. In my experience, scope moves first, almost every time, because scope is the one thing that nobody really watches. A budget gets tracked weekly, deadlines maybe even daily. Scope creep happens in a Slack message, in a hallway conversation, in a "can we also just?" that sounds small in the moment, so nobody really logs it until it's already 3 decisions deep. So the triangle isn't really a triangle in practice. It's scope drifting quietly while time and cost get all the attention, until the drift is big enough that one of the other two finally has to move too. And by then, it looks sudden, even though it wasn't. Scope changing mid-project isn't a reason to blow the deadline. It's a reason to change what done means inside this deadline. On the renovation, we are still hitting hours. Costs a bit more, not just money, but personal effort, time and work. A bit more hands-on than planned. The result, though, should be better, not just different. And that's the bet we are making by absorbing the extra effort instead of the extra time. And the same logic applies to an implementation. Hold the deadline. Let scope and effort absorb the shock. Don't let quality quietly drop just because the deadline's the thing everyone's agreed to and the project needs to fit it. When the plan still matched reality, that was a different story. So there are three things to carry over directly if you actually want to tackle this. Budget. Budget's like before the first surprise, not after it. If your plan has 0 room in it, the first undocumented finding isn't an inconvenience, but a crisis. Second, assume undocumented reality is the default, not the exception. Go find it before it finds you. Ask the people actually doing the work what they really do, not what the process document says they should do. Third, track scope with the same discipline you track budget and deadline, because it's the constraint that moves first and gets watched the least. If nobody owns scope the way someone owns the budget line, scope will always be the one that drifts. If you're 2 weeks into a project and the plan doesn't match what you're actually building anymore, that's not failure. That's the project telling you the truth for the first time. So tell me, what's the last thing that showed up in your build that the original scope never accounted for? Tell me in the comments below. If you found this useful, a like helps more than you think. And if you know someone mid-project right now, send them this one. I post here on YouTube with a written guide on the same topic going up on Substack a week later. And I'm on LinkedIn twice a week if you want to follow along in between. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.